How gods influence human emotions in myths. 1. Divine and human interconnection. Gods in myths are often portrayed as directly influencing human emotions, reflecting the interconnection between the divine and the human. When we look at myths from diverse cultures, we realize that the interconnection between the divine and the human is not just a matter of belief, but a reality that permeates the human experience. Gods are not distant figures. They represent fundamental aspects of life and the emotions that we all feel. For example, throughout history, deities such as Zeus in the Greek pantheon and Odin in Norse mythology have been intimately connected to human experiences, reflecting not only our higher side but also our weaknesses. It is fascinating to note how, in many myths, human emotions are shaped by divine intervention. When we are faced with an emotional challenge, such as the loss of a loved one or the betrayal of a friend, we often feel that these experiences are beyond our control. Myths offer us an explanation for this feeling, suggesting that the gods are always involved in our lives. By telling the stories of gods who fall in love, rebel, or take revenge, we find a clear representation of the emotions we experience. Thus, the interconnection between the divine and the human reveals how we are, in fact, part of something greater. When I reflected on my own life, I realized that many of my deepest emotions, such as joy, sadness, and even anger, often resemble the stories I have learned about the gods. This leads me to believe that humanity, at its core, seeks to understand its own nature through these narratives. The divine is not just a separate entity. It is an extension of ourselves. Through myths, we can find a mirror that reflects our struggles and triumphs. This interconnection also manifests itself in rituals and spiritual practices. Often, people seek the help of higher powers to deal with emotions that seem overwhelming. When we light a candle or say a prayer, we are acknowledging this connection and asking for support in times of emotional difficulty. These practices are not only a way to seek comfort, but also an acknowledgement that our emotions are connected to something beyond ourselves. Myths, then, serve as a bridge. Through these stories, we can explore our emotions in a deeper and more meaningful way. By telling and retelling the stories of the gods, we create a connection to what it means to be human. Each narrative carries with it lessons about love, loss, jealousy, and even forgiveness. These elements are universal and timeless, resonating not only in our lives, but also in the lives of generations before us and those yet to come. In short, the divine and human interconnection teaches us that we are not alone in our emotional experiences. The gods, through their stories and teachings, offer us valuable perspective on how to deal with life's ups and downs. By understanding this connection, we can find a clearer path to self-acceptance and understanding the emotions that make us human. 2. Personification of emotions. In the vast universe of myths, deities are not just distant figures, but tangible representations of the emotions that we all experience. Each god or goddess often embodies a specific emotion, transforming abstract feelings into tangible entities. When we think of these deities, such as Aphrodite, the goddess of love, or Ares, the god of war, we realize that we are faced with forces that shape not only mythological narratives, but also our own lives. The personification of emotions in myths allows us to understand the complexity of the human being in an accessible way. Instead of just treating love or anger as concepts, we can see how these emotions manifest themselves through the actions and decisions of divine beings. For example, Aphrodite is not only romantic love, but also passion, attraction, and even obsession. This leads us to reflect on how love, in its various forms, influences our choices and relationships. On the other hand, Ares represents not only war, but also the anger and aggression that often take over us in moments of frustration. When we look at the stories of these gods, we can ask ourselves, how has passion or anger shaped my own life? This intimate connection helps us recognize that emotions are not mere reactions, but forces that can guide us for good or for evil. In addition, by personifying emotions, we also find a space to explore the consequences of our actions. In many myths, Deities face direct results of their emotions. For example, Hera's jealousy often leads to conflict and tragedy, reflecting how this emotion can destroy relationships and generate discontent. This makes us reflect on our own jealousy and how it can interfere with our lives and relationships. These stories not only entertain us, but also offer valuable lessons in emotional management. By watching the deities face their emotions, we are invited to examine our own feelings and behaviors. How do we deal with unrequited love? How can anger lead us to hasty decisions? When we look to myths, we find a rich source of wisdom that encourages us to reflect on our emotional experiences and the way we choose to act on them. Furthermore, myths show us that emotions are universal and timeless. No matter the time or culture, the human experience of love, hate, joy, and sadness remains. This connects us to a collective and deep understanding of our humanity. By sharing and discussing these stories, we create a space of empathy and understanding among ourselves. In short, the personification of emotions in mythological deities allows us to explore the complexity of our feelings in an accessible and meaningful way. Through the stories of gods and goddesses, we are invited to reflect on our own emotions and the way they shape our lives. It is an opportunity for growth, self-knowledge, and, above all, understanding that, just like the gods, we are also guided and influenced by our emotions. This connection is fundamental to our personal and spiritual journey. 3. Mythological examples. Stories of gods and goddesses, such as Aphrodite and Ares, show how their actions and relationships impact the emotional lives of mortals. Myths are full of fascinating characters who, in addition to being divine, reflect very human aspects. A clear example of this is the goddess Aphrodite, who represents love and beauty. She not only symbolizes these feelings, but is also involved in stories that show how love can be both a blessing and a curse. In her adventures, Aphrodite provokes intense passions, but also jealousy and conflicts. This makes us reflect on how love, in our lives, can generate as much joy as pain. On the other hand, we have Ares, the god of war, who symbolizes aggression and fighting. The relationship between Aphrodite and Ares is emblematic. They are passionate, but they also wreak havoc on their lives and the lives of others. When we look at this dynamic, we realize that war and love are not so far apart. Oftentimes, in our own lives, conflicting emotions can be extremely difficult to manage. The stories of Ares and Aphrodite teach us that there is always a duality in human emotions. The same situation can bring both love and conflict, and this is something that we all experience at different times. A story that particularly touches me is the story of Perseus and Medusa. Perseus, in his quest to defeat the feared Medusa, faces not only a physical challenge, but an emotional one as well. Medusa, a tragic figure, was transformed into a monster, not by her own choice, but as a result of a violent act. This story makes us think about how we deal with our own fears and traumas. Often, the figures we consider to be monsters have deep stories that need to be understood. By looking at these myths, we are invited to reflect on our own fears, how we deal with them, and the importance of empathy. Another example that illustrates the emotional connection between divine beings and mortals is the story of Hades and Persephone. Their relationship, marked by abduction and separation, reflects the complexity of life and death. Hades, as the god of the underworld, represents what we often fear: the unknown, the end. On the other hand, Persephone, who is taken to the underworld, symbolizes renewal and hope. Together, they teach us about the cycle of life and death and how sadness can coexist with joy. This narrative touches something very deep within us: the acceptance of loss and the beauty that can emerge after mourning. These stories are not mere fables, they are reflections on ourselves. By studying mythology, we can see the emotional challenges we face in our daily lives and understand that, like the gods, we too are shaped by our experiences. Through the actions and interactions of mythological figures, we have the chance to explore the ups and downs of emotional life. Therefore, when considering these narratives, it is important to remember that they serve as a guide. They help us navigate the complexities of our own emotions and find meaning in the experiences we live. 4. Conflicts and resolutions. Conflicts between gods often mirror human conflicts, offering a way to understand and resolve complex emotions. When we look at myths, one of the things we notice most is that what stands out is the way in which the conflicts between gods reflect our own disagreements and dilemmas. It is almost as if these mythical narratives are a mirror of our emotions and relationships. For example, let us think of Zeus and Hera. Their relationship is full of betrayal, jealousy, and power struggles. By following their stories, we can see how these conflicts are mirrored in our everyday lives. We often find ourselves involved in disagreements with people close to us, and these mythological stories help us understand that human nature is complex and full of nuances. These divine conflicts are not mere fictional plots. They serve as a guide for us. When a god becomes enraged and seeks revenge, this may be a reflection of how we, as humans, often react to situations of injustice or betrayal. The difference is that, while the gods have supernatural powers and can cause greater damage, we deal with our emotions in more subtle but no less impactful ways. It's normal to feel angry or resentful in certain situations, but how can we resolve these feelings constructively? One of the lessons myths teach us is that acknowledging conflict is the first step toward resolution. When a god decides to confront another, whether through epic battles or cunning schemes, they are forcing a conversation about their emotions. Likewise, we too need to feel comfortable expressing what's bothering us. Oftentimes, a lack of communication is what perpetuates conflict, whether in family relationships, friendships, or even in the workplace. In addition, myths teach us that resolving conflict often requires a sacrifice, a compromise, or an act of empathy. In the world of the gods, this might mean offering something in exchange for peace. For us, this might mean apologizing, listening to the other side, and working together to find common ground. True resolution comes when we can look beyond our own feelings and consider how our actions impact others. On the other hand, stories also show us that there are consequences to our actions. When a god acts selfishly or vengefully, it often results in a chain of events that affect not only themselves but also those around them. This makes us reflect on the importance of our daily choices. Every decision we make has the potential to create conflict or foster harmony. Therefore, by studying these conflicts between gods, we are invited to reflect on our own emotional challenges. What can we learn from these timeless stories? How can we apply these teachings to our own lives? The journey of understanding and resolving emotional conflicts is an ongoing one. But by looking to the lessons of the past, we find inspiration to face our own challenges. The connection between gods and humans, through conflict and its resolution, is an invitation to reflection and self-understanding. As we confront the complex emotions that surround us, we can remember that, like myths, our stories are also constantly evolving. 5. Rituals and cults. Rituals and cults have played a fundamental role in the spiritual and emotional life of societies throughout history. Since ancient times, people have sought ways to connect with the divine, believing that these practices could positively influence their lives. Thus, rituals emerged not only as a way to worship the gods, but also as a way to understand and manipulate human emotions. When we talk about rituals, it is important to emphasize that they go far beyond simple repetitive actions. Every movement, every word, and every object used carries a deep meaning. For example, in many cultures, the offering of flowers or food is seen as a gesture of gratitude. By doing so, the intention is to establish a connection with the sacred, creating a space where emotions can be expressed and, often, transformed. It is as if we are saying to the gods, "I acknowledge your presence in my life, and I want you to know how I feel." This exchange, although symbolic, is a crucial aspect of our spirituality. Personally, I have always been impressed by the dedication that people have to these rituals. In many traditions, there are festivals that celebrate the harvest, the changing of the seasons, or even the passage of significant events in a person's life. These celebrations are not only moments of joy, but also opportunities to reflect on emotions such as gratitude, hope, and sometimes even grief. Through dance, song, and prayer, participants come together in a common purpose, creating a sense of community that is essential for emotional well-being. Cultural services, in turn, often serve the function of guiding individuals in their relationship with the divine. They provide a safe space where emotions can be explored and understood. An example of this can be found in groups that meet regularly to meditate or pray together. During these gatherings, people share their experiences, their joys and their sorrows, creating an environment of mutual support. This reminds us that we are not alone in our feelings. We all go through emotional ups and downs. In addition, rituals have the power to provide a sense of control in a world that often feels chaotic. In times of uncertainty, performing a ritual can bring an inner peace, as if we are doing something meaningful to influence what is beyond our reach. This is especially true in times of personal crisis, where practicing a ritual can be an anchor, a way to reaffirm our faith and hope. It is interesting to note that although rituals and worship can vary widely across cultures, the essence remains the same: the search for connection, understanding, and emotional balance. Deep down, we all long to be heard and understood, and rituals provide us with that channel. By engaging in these practices, we not only evoke the divine presence, but we also give voice to our emotions, allowing them to be acknowledged and ultimately healed. Therefore, as we reflect on the importance of rituals and worship, it is essential to remember that they are much more than simple traditions. They are powerful tools that help us navigate the complexities of emotional life, connecting us both with the divine and with each other. Ultimately, this interconnectedness is what makes us human and helps us find meaning in our experiences.